Welcome to the Gaggle, where we challenge and, if necessary, destroy media narratives. I'm George Samueli. It is now 9:07 p.m. in Hungary, where, as I said, many times, summer is a distant memory. I'm almost bedridden with fall allergies, and it's we're really getting ready for the short, dark days of winter, and so that's it. There's nothing whatever to look forward to other than months and months of misery. So, on that very cheerful note, but one that I try to impart with regularity, I welcome everybody who has joined me. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. And today is the day of, no, not an interview with Kamala Harris. No, not an interview with Kamala Harris. But a performance involving Kamala and Waltz, the governor of Minnesota, her running mate, Tim Waltz, Tampon Tim, as he's known. And so they will do a joint meeting. It's not an interview. They're going to do a joint session with Dana Bash, one of the least inspiring figures on television. And what's interesting about that is that there was all this talk that Kamala will do this her first sit-down interview. She's going to do a first sit-down interview before the end of August. So she's already been the nominee for I think 35 days. So 35 days. So it's 5 weeks. So she agreed, and then it turned out she didn't agree, because it's just going to be her sitting next to her running mate, Tampon Tim. And so what happens there? That's not an interview. That's like a couple, like a celebrity couple that's just got engaged, and they sit down with a celebrity journalist, and they tell the journalist who's been assigned to write a puff piece, how they're looking forward to their engagement and what their plans are for their nuptials. So, you can imagine the questions. How do the two of you get on? Do you like each other? Yeah, we really get on. We really like each other. And do your families get on? Yeah, they really get on. Yeah, they really have a great time together. Who will host the Thanksgiving barbecue? Tim will host the Thanksgiving barbecue. He's very good with the barbecue. He likes to grill steaks and sausages on the barbecue. And that's going to be the thrust of this fascinating discussion. So the question then is will Tim rescue Kamala from any awkward, embarrassing faux pas that she's like to perpetrate? Well, I think he probably will. Interestingly, it's not even going to be a live interview. It'll be a pre-recorded interview. So a pre-recorded interview will allow CNN to edit out any embarrassing gaffes and any embarrassing mistakes and so on. So this is a completely ridiculous exercise, and particularly when you've built up all this expectation about this first sit-down interview. Now, the Harris campaign has made clear that she will nonetheless sit down for a one-on-one interview at some point. But of course, that some point gets ever further away, because let's remember, this is the Labor Day weekend. So that means what today is the 29th. So tomorrow is the 30th. And that means Monday, which is Labor Day, that's September the 2nd. And then September the 2nd. And then so September the 3rd, that's the first day everyone goes back. But that's just 1 week before the debate. So she has to prep for the debate. The debate is on September the 10th. So so that's September the 10th. And so then after the debate, you got all the post-match analysis, who won, who lost, Kamala did so well, and so on and so forth. And so that already gets us into mid-September. So from mid-September, you really only have, how many you got? 2, 6, just about 6 weeks left. So there really isn't any time to do too many interviews. You've only got 6 weeks, and you got 6 weeks. Hey, I got to go here. I got to go there. I got a campaign in Pennsylvania. I got a campaign in Michigan. So I don't think she's going to do too many sit-down interviews. I don't think she's going to do any news conferences. I think they're going to try and glide by with what they've got, and their figure that, hey, we're not doing badly. It's the polls are showing we're doing okay. I mean, I think his polls are fake, and they're deliberately fake, but the polls are showing that she's doing pretty decently. And they say, well, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. If it's working well for her, and then she's ahead nationally and ahead in the battleground states, well, let's just do as we did before, which is just don't do any appearances. So I think I don't think we're going to have any interviews. I don't think we're going to have any debates after that one debate on September the 10th. I don't think there'll be any more debates, other than the big confrontation between Tampon Tim, and JD Vance. Weird. This is weird. So I think that's right. Now, I hope everyone's going to watch this totally unfascinating interview with Kamala later today. So the other thing is in the news is obviously the indictment of Pavel Durov. And what's very interesting, I mean, again, and this is what we talked about yesterday with Peter, is that there's very little sympathy from the media for Durov. I mean, there's a lot of kind of malicious cackling and gleefulness that there's such a, hey, he got what he deserved because he wasn't actively cooperating with government. Now, normally you would think, well, the media should be saying, yeah, but it's not the job of any media outlet or a publisher or whatever to cooperate with government. So out comes the familiar standby, which is, oh, but what about the child porn? Apparently, Telegram is riddled with child porn. Apparently, there's just, wherever you look, there are images of the sexual abuse of children. I mean, nobody's ever seen those pictures, but nonetheless, it's riddled with those images. And of course, terrorists are ubiquitous everywhere. There's a terrorist plot on Telegram. And now, the thing to remember is that if you're going to use that argument, then of course this is a justification for essentially for want of a better word, of a totalitarian state. Because in a totalitarian state, it says, well, we are surrounded by enemies. They're everywhere, whether it's child porn creators or terrorists or whatever. And we need cooperation from everyone, because we're the government and we're doing the God's work on earth, and you need to cooperate with us fully. And that's the argument. And the media are happily saying, yeah, that's exactly what we should do. The moment the government comes along and says, we're investigating child porn, he doesn't actually present any evidence of where is this child porn. Therefore, we have to give them all the secrets. Then there is no such thing as a freedom. And that's really the principle. The principle is certainly as enshrined in the U.S. Constitution, that governments can't just use the excuse that they're investigating some crime or other to take away your basic freedoms, like you have against unreasonable search and seizure. I mean, it would be great. I mean, it would be easy to say, yeah, look, we're investigating child sexual abuse, so we're going to go through your house, we're going to go through all of your desks and your closets and whatever, because we're investigating child sexual abuse. And that's really the point, and that you have something in the U.S. Constitution, which is the Fourth Amendment, the unreasonable searches and seizures, which is you can't just use some excuse, because the governments are always going to come along with a great excuse for curtailing your basic rights. Oh, well, hey, we're investigating terrorism. And, I mean, what does your right to privacy matter when it comes to this great goal of fighting terrorism? I mean, that's a very basic point, but it seems to be completely lost on much of the media that just simply repeat, oh, well, Durov isn't cooperating on the issue of child porn. Well, and that's the sort of the extraordinary thing, that the media are happy to just go along with government's claims. They're never in any way curious about any of these allegations. Where is this child porn? Where is this ring of sexual predators? Now, as a matter of fact, we know that governments don't do anything at all to crack down on child predators. We know this. I mean, I don't need to go into what happened in the UK with the grooming gangs, which went on for years. I mean, when all that's been investigated, the grooming gangs in Rotherham in the UK, where the bunch of the most creepiest individuals were using vulnerable young underage girls as prostitutes, as porn stars, and this had gone on for years and years under the eyes of the police. These grooming gangs, and they didn't do anything about it. we mustn't interfere with community standards. These are these Muslim communities. The community leaders didn't want this kind of interference, so that went on. So we don't give a damn about child sexual abuse. We know this. We know that you didn't do anything really for decades as to when it happened to Rotherham. Now, the same applies to Jeffrey Epstein. I mean, we know exactly. I mean, everyone had known about everything Jeffrey Epstein had been up to, and no one did anything about it. So it's all a complete lie. The government wants to present as an excuse. It's always the excuse to invade people's privacy, that they are somehow trying to get to the bottom of child sex abuse, when we know that that is not what they're doing, and they have no interest at all in doing this. And again, I mean, there's so many examples. Another example is, of course, the case of Jimmy Savile. Now, Jimmy Savile, everyone had known what kind of a creature Savile was. The guy had been a kind of a celebrity television personality at the BBC for decades and decades, and there had been a legion of complaints from young girls about Savile's behavior. No one did anything. The BBC did nothing. The police did nothing, despite all of the complaints. And it was even worse than that. They allowed Savile to oversee psychiatric hospitals. This is a man who had absolutely no medical training, to say the least. But apparently they allowed him, because he's a celebrity, to go in and out of a psychiatric hospital, where there were a lot of young women, with all kinds of serious mental health issues. And he just had free reign over it. Oh, he's a celebrity. Hey, get a celebrity, let him have it. So that the key is not for one moment to believe that governments have any interest whatever to crack down on child sexual abuse. And then again, and there's of course the case of the Belgians, if they're from the 1990s. That's already a long time ago. Again, we knew about the sexual abuse in Belgium. No one did a thing. So now when we're getting, we have to get to, we've got to get to Telegram because of all this child sex abuse. No, you are lying. And so therefore, we're not buying any of that. But the media are very happy with it, because the media always want to tell us what great guys the government is. They're so fantastic. They're really always looking out for our welfare. You imagine all these fantastic people like Emmanuel Macron, Obama, Biden, Harris. They're always, sitting there, trying to do the best for us. And it's people like Durov or Musk, these free speech absolutists who are trying to prevent them from doing their job. So let's see. One other thing I should mention is this ridiculous story of Cemetery Gate. So as you know, I think on Monday, Trump took part in a ceremony at the Arlington National Cemetery for the 13 American servicemen who were killed in a terrorist attack during the appalling withdrawal from Afghanistan. Early on in the Biden administration. No one else, no other senior government official showed up. Biden is vegetating on a beach somewhere. Harris is cackling somewhere, and Big Tim, or Tampon Tim, is prancing around doing whatever he does when he's prancing around. Anyway, Trump showed up at the request of the families of the 13 servicemen who had fallen. And then apparently they got into some kind of an altercation with a woman, has to be a woman who worked at the cemetery and just didn't seem to like Trump. Obviously, didn't obviously got very upset that Trump was there. Got into an altercation, and then of course the media now made this into an issue, whereas the issue should be, why didn't Biden show up at this ceremony, or why didn't Harris show up, or why didn't Lloyd Austin or some senior Pentagon official show up at this ceremony? So instead of that, I mean, why was it only Trump who showed up? Instead of that, they made this about Trump. Trump was just using this as a political campaigning. Well, that may be. He may well have been using it as a political campaign, but nonetheless, he didn't do anything explicitly political. He went there at the invitation of the families. The families wanted to take photographs with him. He obliged. He posed with the family members for photographs, and then this official from this obnoxious official at the cemetery got into an altercation, and boom, the media have got a story. Oh, Cemetery Gate. Trump got into an altercation with somebody who works at the Arlington National Cemetery, and therefore that becomes the story. Not why was Harris not at the at this ceremony. That isn't the story. So the media can then run with another day, maybe 2 days of this idiotic stories about what happened at the Arlington Cemetery, and that's the way the media operate, and that's how they're going to be operating through to election day. Anyway, let's look at some of the issues raised by our audience, and particularly we'll look at the comments from Gagglers. Essay Delendam says, Hugh, I'm persuaded that the glow on George's face is a signal from another star. It's telling me George is O'Brien and saying, what's wrong with being O'Brien? I'm not sure at all. I don't see myself as O'Brien from 1984. That's not. I don't. He's not a good person. I mean, no. I think he's not at all a good person. I'm also not really persuaded. I was never persuaded, even in 1984, that O'Brien would talk like that. I mean, when he described the future is a boot crashing into a human face forever. The problem is that you don't want to be that blunt in your description. You need to you have to persuade people that the future, that we're marching towards the radiant future. The future will be divine. Everyone will be happy. Everyone will transcend his limitations, and we'll all be work together. The lion will lie down with the lamb. From each according to his abilities, to each according to his needs. There won't be any more confrontations. You have to tell people that that's the future. But in the meantime, things are going to be harsh. They're brutal. It's like Keir Starmer was saying the other day. Things are going to be brutal in the meantime. Yeah, there'll be a boot crashing into a human face for the time being until we reach the radiant future. That's the way the real O'Briens of the world, sell the bill of goods to the public. But Orwell had O'Brien saying, well, that's the future. There's nothing else in the future other than a boot crashing into a human face forever. And I don't really believe that. I don't think that's how you sell. You have to sell people on utopia. You have to make them believe that however miserable they are now, it's all for the greater good. They'll be then eventually people will live happily. And they will reach that utopia. So that's that was my problem with them at Brian. And so all right, Cynthia, always good to see you, Cynthia. Thank you so much. And so Cynthia says, just to let you know, George, it's true that Andrew Napolitano was kicked off YouTube for a week after Pepe Escobar was on his show. But it was due to what Napolitano said and not anything that Pepe said on the show. What he specifically said, which YouTube deemed as hate speech, was, we all know what those swastika tattoos on their arms represent when referring to the Azov battalion. Huh. Why would that be hate speech? Why would that qualify? Why would that lead to Napolitano getting banned for that? I mean, that doesn't. I mean, that's a reasonable thing to say. We all know what those swastika tattoos represent. I mean, I don't see anything unreasonable about that. But that's interesting because I had assumed that it was something that Pepe had said, because Pepe kind of talks in a very free way, and I thought, oh well, it must be Pepe. I didn't think it was anything that Napolitano said, but that seems surprising. That he says what those swastika tattoos on their arms represent. Anyway, well, I get, but I guess Napolitano is back. But somebody really ought to explain to me, and maybe somebody here knows the answer to this question, is how did Napolitano make this sudden transformation? He used to be a regular at Fox News. He was their legal analyst, very anti-Russian. I remember in 2017, 2018, he said the biggest murderer in the world today is Vladimir Putin. He bought into much of Russiagate and the story of the Trump-Russia collusion. So I just wonder, at what point and why did Napolitano suddenly make this change? How did he get from there, from this stalwart of Fox News? He was at Fox News from the beginning, from the mid-1990s when Fox News was created. How did he get to be an acolyte of Scott Ritter and the rest of that crowd? I'm puzzled. And I'm even surprised that so few people are raising that question. I mean, he may well have changed his mind. There's nothing wrong with changing your mind. But if you do change your mind, I mean, you should at least explain what it was that caused you to change your mind. What event was it? What suddenly happened to make you change your mind? And I don't quite see it so far. I mean, maybe people follow Napolitano a lot closer than I do, and maybe because someone can answer that question for me. Anyway, Cynthia says, but to me, since hate speech is defined as saying anything that may incite others to commit violence against a harmless, innocent group of people, don't you think it's rather odd that YouTube would be so concerned about protecting the safety of the Azov battalion, who are anything but harmless and innocent, especially since it's their job to inflict harm on their innocent? I couldn't agree with you more. I couldn't agree with you. I don't know how anyone can interpret Napolitano's comment as in some ways hate speech against a vulnerable group, and that the Azov battalion is supposedly a vulnerable group. Now, maybe they think that it acts as incitement for for the Russians, that the Russians will go after the Azov battalion. But in the first place, Russia is at war, and Russia is already fighting against Azov, not especially effectively, but nonetheless, it is deemed Azov as the enemy, even though for some mysterious reason it released members of the Azov battalion into the tender hands of Erdogan, and then Erdogan. Well, first of all, they released the members of the Azov battalion to what's the name of the guy? Roman Abramovich. Abramovich then took these members of the Azov battalion on his jet to Istanbul to Erdogan, and Erdogan kept them there until Erdogan released them to Ukraine. I mean, yet another one of those other strange things that Russia did. But nonetheless, okay, let's take the Russians at the face value. They regard Azov as the enemy, and they're waging a war against Azov. But we know that there's a war on, so I don't quite know that hate speech applies to this, because Russia and Azov, and that means Russia and the Ukrainians are fighting a war. So I don't get how hate speech comes into it. I mean, they already hate each other. That's why they're fighting a war. So then they're not sort of innocent, vulnerable minority being picked on. I mean, I agree with you, Cynthia. It doesn't make a great deal of sense. And then Cynthia says, it also seems like when you're a guest on any show on YouTube, you have much more leeway in what you can say than the host does on the show. Do you know if that's actually true or not? She said that when you're a guest on any show, you have much more leeway in what you can say. Well, I mean, if you think about, I mean, it's Napolitano's show. So, I mean, Napolitano has presumably, a lot of leeway because it's his show. He doesn't share it with anyone, so he can pretty much say whatever he likes. Now, if you're the host of a show that is hosted by someone else, then you don't have much leeway. So let's say if you're hosting a show on RT, for instance, you're the host of the show, but ultimately it's RT's show, and RT will have the last say. So you don't really have much leeway. And then in that case, I think the guest has more leeway. Now, is that what you're saying? When you're a guest on a show, you have much more leeway in what you can say. Yeah, no, I think that's right. So but that only happens if it's somebody else's show. So, but in the case of Napolitano, it's his show. So he has a, I don't know, complete leeway as to what he says. I mean, because there's no one else above him, it's his show. Within reason, I mean, obviously, knowing the censorship practices of YouTube, you always have to worry about what YouTube might do. But otherwise, it's his show. So I mean, even on other platforms like TNT Radio, I mean, you have quite a lot of leeway there because they like open debate, and they kind of want people to say all sorts of things. So you have a lot of within reason, I guess with I don't know what the what the limitations are, or somewhere like where at TNT Radio, but yeah, so you have leeway. But yeah, I mean, in general, sure. I mean, if you're a guest on a show, you could say what you want because the host is not your employer. But if if the platform is your employer, then you have constraints. But in this case, I mean, it's hard to it's very hard to see how there's any kind of hate speech involved in this case. I mean, unless Napolitano suggested that the Ukrainian, all of the Ukrainians, all the people who are in the Ukrainian armed forces, all the people fighting for Zelensky, they're all Nazis. And I mean, I don't know if that's what YouTube took Napolitano to be saying. But even if he said that, I don't see any problem with that. I mean, you can agree or you can disagree with that assertion and say, yeah, they're all Nazis. You know, all of the people fighting for the Kiev regime are all basically fighting for Nazism. They're fighting for the swastika. I mean, even if that's what Napolitano was saying, that you know, Ukraine is fighting for Bandera and therefore Nazism. Even if Napolitano were saying that, I don't see anything wrong with that. I mean, it's just that's his opinion. Where does hate speech come into it? I just don't see it at all. You know, just you can disagree, then that's it. You know, that's what free speech is supposed to be about. You can disagree with Napolitano's analysis, but I don't see where hate speech comes into it. But of course, hate speech is a very nebulous term, because, you know, no one exactly knows what hate speech is, other than, well, it's kind of hateful and somebody really doesn't like it. But what does that even mean? I mean, what if you attack Russians? What if you say the Russians are fighting for a fascist dictator? Putin's a fascist dictator, and Russians are fighting for fascism. Is that permissible on YouTube? I mean, was that hate speech? I mean, you could say that's hate speech. So it absolutely doesn't mean anything. I mean, it's just essentially they conjure up all these terms, and it sounds bad. Oh, hate speech. I don't like the sound of that. We need to punish somebody who's engaging in hate speech, because I think, as you said, you know, they're going after some vulnerable minorities. But it's just basically means absolutely nothing. It's just, you know, hatefulness directed at people that YouTube favors. And so since YouTube favors the side of Kiev, and hatefulness directed at the side of Kiev, well, that's hate speech. We need to censor that. So I mean, we still get we're still on YouTube, but we're not monetized. So we don't get any money from YouTube. But at least we haven't been kicked off YouTube so far. But we're not monetized. Anyway, Cynthia goes on. At any rate, here's the specific part of Napolitano's show with Pepe on it as his guest that got him censored from YouTube for a week, which he describes as his first strike on the channel. Okay, so that's a rumble. Okay, well, I'll look at it later. And here's the show in its entirety. Show in its entirety. Whoa. That's I don't know if I want to watch the show in its entirety. I mean, I'll watch the what it was that got him kicked off, but I don't think I can take a whole show with Napolitano and Pepe. That's a little grueling. But thank you, Cynthia, for the link. Thank you as always for your generosity. So let's see. So this is Michael I for an I Morris says it's a racist putting her up like that, not up to it. White House press spokesgirl, happy to have them humiliate themselves for the sake of affirmative action first. They always picked daft ones. No, I mean it is kind of interesting. I mean that, you know, we're supposed to believe that Kamala is a strong woman. She's not one of these strong women, like the Hillary Clinton is a strong woman. And Trump is afraid of strong women. He has a problem coping with strong women. So this strong woman who aspires to be president of the United States cannot sit down for an interview. It's like it's like all those strong women who apparently are harassed on the internet. They need protection on the from all the harassers on the internet because they're so strong. They're such strong women. So she's a strong woman, but we can't put her in an interview, a live interview, one-on-one. We can't have her at a news conference. And so it has to be pre-recorded, and she has to have a sidekick next to her because she's so strong. But the amazing thing is, that so far she's got away with it. I mean, it's like, because again, what the media are doing, and they did this obviously in 2020, is that they're making it about Trump. So as long as you can make every story about Trump, then you could just glide by on the fact that Harris's campaign is about nothing. Joy, joy. And that she has no ideas, no policies, no proposals, and just say, okay, well, it's, we can just glide by and make it about Trump. So if you look at the mainstream media today, they're all talking about Cemetery Gate, which I've already talked about. They're making it about Cemetery Gate. Oh, well, Trump was at Arlington National Cemetery, and blah, 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 and this is what happened, Trump, blah, 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 blah. Well, anytime you're talking about Trump, you're not talking about Harris. And that's the formula. So you can talk, and then, Trump said very mean, nasty, sexist things about Harris. Well, let's talk about all the nasty, sexist things that Trump has said about Harris. And again, we're talking about that. We're not talking about, hey, Harris is aspiring to be president of the United States, the leader of the free world, for God's sake, the leader of the free world. And she's allowed to glide by without saying anything, without proposing anything, because we're going to talk about Trump. And I think Trump is going to be speaking later tonight, well, tonight my time, and that means tomorrow the media will not talk about the abysmal performance of Harris and Tampon Tim. They'll be talking about what Trump said at his rally, or if it's a rally or a speech, I'm not sure. And that's you just make it about Trump, and then people forget about the fact that, well, no one really knows anything about Harris. People at least know about Trump. He's been around now for for decades, but he's been front and center in American politics for 9 years now. Whereas she, hasn't won a single vote. She was thrust into that position of being head of the ticket arbitrarily, without having run at all, without having won any delegates. So you think, well, yeah, shouldn't we know something about her? Shouldn't she really be outlining her program? Since just out of the blue, she was put forward as the the nominee of the Democratic Party. But no, let's talk about Trump. And that thing, if you just look at the front page of the Washington Post, every single story is about Trump. Same with the New York Times. Every single story is about Trump. Anyway. Steve Brown says, in the former USA, the Prodigy case set the precedent in 1998 that carriers cannot be responsible for content. Gradually, over many years, that has morphed to the Nazi state. Well, that's it. I mean, that was a part of the deal of the Communications Decency Act of 1996, which gave that Section 230 of that Communications Decency Act, that gave the carriers, the internet providers, immunity, because they can't be responsible. They are exactly that. They're utilities, and utilities cannot be responsible for what happens. I mean, the telephone companies cannot be responsible for what people say on the phone. The fact that people use the phone to commit crimes doesn't mean that that the head of the phone company is liable for the crimes that are committed. Just like if cars are used to plan robberies, the CEO of Mercedes-Benz is not liable for a crime in which several Mercedes-Benz vehicles were involved. It's I mean it's a fairly obvious point, but it's one that the government's then used. They've been trying to apply pressure against the CEOs in order to be able to get into these carriers and in order then to be able to control and manipulate everything that goes on these carriers, because then it enables essentially the government to monitor all conversations on WhatsApp, on Facebook, on Telegram, on every single platform. The government will be able to step in and spy. So here, there was this been revolution of information, and that people are able to communicate with one another, and then lo and behold, the government says, no, we can't possibly allow people to communicate, because who the hell knows what kind of things they're going to communicate with one another. And I mean, yeah, and that's very important to remember. Governments see the people as their enemy, because the people will ultimately they're going to exchange ideas, they're going to get together, and they're going to say, hey, this isn't very good, because we have governments that are working against our interests. They're doing all sorts of things with our money that we don't want done with. They're working against our interest. And then they start saying, well, why is the government doing this? Why is the government throwing all this money at Ukraine? Why doesn't the government do something about closing the borders? And so on. You can't allow this kind of free exchange of ideas, and that's the important point. The governments see the people as the enemy, and particularly they see populist movements, which in some ways try to mobilize public sentiment, as the enemy. And that's the key. It's not Russia. Russia's not the enemy. They don't really, because these people who run these institutions, the EU, NATO, whatever, they know perfectly well Russia poses no threat whatsoever. But they do see a threat coming from an irate public. It's always been the case, that at some point people are going to get together and say, this isn't really working for us. Hence, how do you do it? Well, you say, hey, we gotta We're going to monitor things. Why do you need to monitor? Well, because of child porn. Child porn. Terrorism. ISIS. ISIS is, is everywhere. Again, as with child porn, governments don't give a rat's ass about ISIS. We know that ISIS was a creation of the Western governments. They don't care whatsoever about that. But they use ISIS just as they use Bin Laden and Al Qaeda, which are also creation of the Western government. They use that as the justification for cracking down on people's freedoms and to get in to these apps, which people, the ultimate goal is to control what people say to one another. That's what it's nothing to do with worrying about drug trafficking. Again, we know that drug trafficking pretty much goes on undisturbed by governments. I mean, it's like it's a joke. I mean, everyone knows drugs are flowing across the borders. There's no issue whatsoever. So again, don't give us this crap that government wants to address the drug traffic problem. So again, we know about the deaths from fentanyl and everything. So this is the crap. But this is how the governments do it. S.A. Dillendam says, George, what is the distinction between the media and other presenters? How do we know, and why should we prefer non-media? I know Fox types always denounce the media, but aren't they the media? Well, you're absolutely right. I mean, it's actually very interesting how Fox News does that. They denounce the media and how the elites, and then you realize, well, Fox News is the media. Fox News is owned by the Murdochs, one of the most powerful families in the world. Fox News is in the business of spreading propaganda on behalf of the Murdochs. The Murdochs have an agenda, and Fox News spreads that agenda. But Fox News presents itself as somehow it's this oppressed minority. Oh, the media, the elite media, they're doing this, and this. Even though Fox News has much bigger ratings than the elite media, the elite media would wish they had anything like Fox News's rating. And of course, much of Fox News is despicable. It's a kind of faux populist, as Murdoch always has been. It's always been a faux populist because, he essentially whips up easy anger about crimes, about crazy people in the universities. They're not unreasonable issues, but he kind of is. He's not. He will always be against organized labor. He would always be against workers wanting more money, which just shows you that it's a faux populist. He's not going to do anything for workers. Not even going to do anything about immigration. Murdoch has always been an open borders person. But this is the secret of his success, because he does this tabloid journalism. Again, easy stuff for picking on crime, and then of course, he knows how to put together a good tabloid, lurid headlines, lots and lots of talk about sex and all sorts of lubricious subjects, and that's it. Now, the rest, when you talk about the alternative media, well, the alternative media, I think they're much of a muchness. There's a lot of there's some interesting stuff there. There's a lot of crap there, and I think one has to be very careful. I've talked a lot about the war in Ukraine. I don't think the alternative media have been particularly good on that. I'm not saying the mainstream media have been good, but I don't think much of the alternative media have been particularly good either, in different ways. So you got to. I mean, it's a good thing that the grip of the mainstream media has been loosened for the time being, because we don't yet know how things are going to play out with the alternatives, whether Twitter and so on. So, but there's no question the mainstream media absolutely wants any alternatives to be crushed mercilessly, and that's why they're always peddling stuff about disinformation. There's a lot of disinformation that you find on Twitter. We've got to deal with disinformation. Telegram, disinformation. Disinformation is information that you don't like. And yeah, that's the mainstream media. That things that they don't like, they're going to come. Disinformation, and government has a somehow responsibility of eliminating disinformation. Totally made up out of whole cloth. Why does government have any kind of responsibility to deal with disinformation? None. It's not at all. We can have disinformation, we got misinformation, malinformation. That's all part of speech, all part of free speech. There's nothing to do with anyone else. The government to attack it. And then and then Cynthia says, and that doesn't speak well for Kamala as a woman if she has to depend on a man being by her side to get her through an interview, particularly given that it's going to be a softball interview. No, it really doesn't. And as I said earlier, I mean, I don't want to hear about her being a strong woman. I mean, how are you a strong woman if you have to have a man next to you? I mean, whatever you may think of Margaret Thatcher, but Margaret Thatcher never needed a man sitting next to her to guide her through an interview. I mean, she was pretty formidable. Not very likable, but a prime minister doesn't have to be likable. No, she was never a very likable person. But she knew how to get through an interview. She knew how to handle reporters. Didn't need a minder. So, but she's a strong woman. So, but it's going to be worse than just a softball interview. It's going to be like, they aren't even talk about anything substantial. I think it's just going to be about how much they like each other and how much their children or stepchildren really get on so well together. And then they can glide through. It's just an hour. So it's an hour, 3 people babbling away, laughing and yucking it up. It's going to be an absolute non-event. And it's a real disgrace that CNN agreed to anything like that. Anne Marie, always so good to see you. Thank you so much. It says, good evening, George and Gagglers. Could buy the coins directly on local. So thank God you're able to do that. So thank you so much for your generosity. Like to know about what's going on in Switzerland. I mean, every time we see you, I'm kind of curious what's happening there. Nothing good, I'm sure, but I'm very, very curious. And then Steve Brown says, on Fox, they were saying, what will Cackles do when she has to face evil dictators like Xi, Putin, and Fat Boy on her own? Is Fat Boy the Kim Jong-un? You always put them together, Xi, Putin, and I mean, that it's a complete sort of non sequitur. I mean, you should be any political leader anywhere should be able to sit down for a one-on-one interview and handle questions posed by a reporter. That has nothing to do with, what are you going to do with Putin and Xi and Kim Jong-un? I mean, that's just a sequitur. I mean, you should be able to handle a reporter. You should be able to sit for an hour and answer questions intelligently without breaking into a cackling. But this is typical Fox News. Oh well, Putin. Oh, what is going to be with Putin? That's probably easier to handle somebody like Putin because Putin or Xi, they'll be very polite. I mean, when you deal with foreign leaders, they're just very polite. You don't really say anything very much. They're not going to say anything hostile. That's not the function of summits. When you meet the head of state, there's nothing nothing unpleasant happens. I mean, but when you're talking to reporters, ideally something unpleasant should happen. I mean, if you ask a good question. But I remember, when that woman, Nora O'Donnell, I think she's the NBC Washington bureau chief, some big job. And she and there was some question during the White House news conference. It was a couple of months ago, and Karim Jean-Pierre was the presiding over the news conference, and somebody asked a question about Biden. What's Biden's view of something? Or is Biden taking part in something or other? And then somebody else then chimed in, oh, he's probably sleeping. And then Nora O'Donnell turned around with fury. That was uncalled for. So she turns against her own colleague, who had just said, lightheartedly, oh, he's probably sleeping. So that was uncalled for. And of course, Karine Jean-Pierre was gleeful that this reporter had been put in his place by Nora O'Donnell. And then the other day, after the Harris had given her her speech at the convention, and she was leaving, I don't know, somewhere at the back of the hall, or at the staircase, the tunnels underneath the convention center, whatever. She was walking with her hubby, and there was Nora O'Donnell, who thrust a microphone into Kamala's face. And what was the question she asked Kamala was, how do you feel? That was it. That was the question. How do you feel? And what did Kamala say? I feel good. Well, that was it. That was that tough, grueling question that Nora O'Donnell, head of the the Washington Post, the Washington bureau chief of NBC. That was, she finally got her chance to ask Kamala a question, and she says, "How do you feel?" I feel good. All right. So that's that's the tough questions that you talk up. And then Singing Bicycle says, "Thank you so much, Singing Bicycle. Really appreciate that. Keep up the good work." Well, thank you. I really appreciate that. And then Marty says, also, "Thank you so much, Marty. Really appreciate that." And then Dale, oh, it's now good to see you again, Dale. It says, "George, what strikes you most about Starmer? Sliminess, snobbery, mediocrity, banality?" Yes, is the answer. Yeah, he's all of those things. But what's so striking is the arrogance. This is a man who absolutely believes he's superior to the people that he aspires to lead. He feels nothing but contempt for them, finds them dirty, grubby, stupid, smelly, and therefore he knows far better what's good for everybody else than they do. And he has no qualms at all about imposing the worst kind of hardships on others, not for himself, but the hardships on others, in order to realize his particular goals. His goals are, of course, the usual banal, dumb, globalist nonsense. So, if you look at all the things that have happened in recent years, like COVID, it's no surprise that he was, of course, an ardent locker downer, an ardent vaxxer, because he believes, well, this is what the experts, and I am one of the experts, I'm one of the sort of the ruling elites who knows better what needs to be done. I will order everybody to stay in their homes. And anybody who breaks the curfew that I'm entitled to impose will be punished to the full extent of the law. He has no qualms at all. You break the curfew, you go to prison. This man is quite frightening because he has there's no human compassion with him. And therefore, and because he has utter contempt for the people, he is ready to impose the most draconian punishment on ordinary people. So that moment of COVID kind of crystallized the arrogance of a ruling elite, and Starmer is the perfect embodiment of that. So if you recall, COVID was a real blow against the populists. I mean, the populists were kind of riding high, after Trump and Brexit, and so up until, say, 2018, 2019, it seemed like, hey, the people have asserted themselves against their kind of arrogant ruling overlords. And then came COVID. And suddenly COVID was a shot in the arm for the, quote, experts, unquote. Hey, there's a pandemic. We need experts to deal with a pandemic. Hey, we need people with scientific knowledge. Hey, we need people who can organize society to deal with a pandemic. So suddenly, the populists were caught flat-footed, and this was the signal for the Faucis, for the Starmers, and unfortunately, Trump, who should have been actually the leader of a kind of populist rejection of the so-called experts, he kind of fell in with that. He didn't put up too much of a resistance, allowed Fauci to run the show, and so that was the great kind of shot in the arm for people like Starmer. So today Starmer announced that he's going to crack down even more on smoking. Apparently, that's the overwhelming problem facing Britain today. Not plummeting living standards, not the fact that people are going into winter without the heating allowance, not the money being wasted in Ukraine, not the recklessness of British policy in Ukraine, where Starmer apparently wants to remove all constraints on Ukraine in the use of the Storm Shadow missiles. Apparently, so far, he hasn't been able to pull it off because the Americans are a little concerned and they don't want to basically give the green light for the use of these Storm Shadow missiles. They're still under American control, but that probably will change. So none of that. What's the problem? What is the problem facing Britain? Too much smoking. Too many smokers. And he's going to crack down on smoking outside pubs, smoking in the gardens of pubs, because, again, he's in the business of cracking down on ordinary people. Because ordinary people, they get a pleasure out of smoking. They get a pleasure out of drinking. This infuriates him. these are people who need to do as they're told. It just infuriates him that they're going out drinking and smoking. So he's going to crack down because that's his priority. And now remember, as he said the other day, he's going after all of the people and all of the enablers of these recent protests. There are people being arrested now in Britain who took part in those protests as young as 11. Because Starmer has basically told the police, hey, you got to go and arrest everybody who was involved, no matter how young they are. So imagine that 11-year-olds are being hauled in to police stations and in the courts. Starmer doesn't care. These are 11-year-olds. We got to catch them early, because if, catch them at the age of 11, we may be able to turn them into little Starmers. If we allow them to just, stay, with their parents, they'll turn into these bad people who will riot against me. So this is a person who's frightening in his narrow-mindedness, frightening in his lack of imagination, frightening in his arrogance, and ultimately, I think, just frightening in his kind of globalist vision. He wants to defy the British decision on Brexit. He wants to go back into the EU. He thinks he's going to do it through the back door. Maybe he will, but he's made that clear. And he's not even doing anything about immigration. Even the hapless Sergeant Schultz, admittedly, he's got an election coming up, is now saying apparently acting, in a feeble way, but at least he's sort of carrying out deportations in Germany. And he says, if you need more deportations, we got to get rid of deportations. I mean, he's got an election coming up, and he knows that his days in power are numbered. So he's now doing something about the illegal migrants in Germany. But Starmer, having seen, how people feel, he doesn't care. It's good for them. Multiculturalism is good for you. And I will go on promoting multiculturalism. My dad was a toolmaker. So there's no worst. I mean, Starmer is probably the worst person who has been prime minister, I think, in my lifetime. I can't think of anyone. I mean, I never liked any prime minister, but this person is the worst. I mean, he's just frightening in his mediocrity, in his lack of imagination, and in his ruthless authoritarianism. Because that combination, that's chilling. Otherwise, he's a great guy. Anyway, Steve Brown says, Napolitano was in the pay of the vile empire. Seems that changed at some point, but he still seems to have a Newsmax contract. And of course, Newsmax is pro-Goon and Arnaud de Bourgrave, 1000% Zion. So that's what you're saying. That explains his position, that because he has a contract with Newsmax. I didn't know that he has a contract with Newsmax. How did he do that? I mean, Newsmax is a competitor with Fox, so I guess he signed on with Newsmax after he left Fox. But why does he need Newsmax? I mean, he's apparently making a lot of money doing his own shows. So you remember Arnaud de Bourgrave, one of the great sort of frauds of the past. Arnaud de Bourgrave. It's funny you remember him. I didn't know anyone still remembered Arnaud de Bourgrave. Anyway, Road Gent, good evening all. Good evening, Road Gent. And then Perusa Sorry if I mispronounced that. It's hard to see. Maybe Napolitano changed with Tucker Carlson, his friend, but then they're no friends. He and Tucker Carlson are not friends. I remember Tucker having Anya Parampil on when there was a coup against Maduro. He also had Aaron Mate on, and both are on Napolitano show. Yeah, now they are, but at the time, Napolitano was on the other side. And it got quite tense. I remember because they had that guy, Victoria Tensing, and her husband, that guy who was the U.S. attorney in D.C. I forget his name, but he's the husband of Victoria Tensing. And they were talking about Russiagate and about the whole story of Trump-Russia collusion. And then I think Tucker mentioned Napolitano because Napolitano was basically saying, yeah, I mean, the Mueller, has Trump dead to rights on Russia collusion, and so this guy, God, I just can't remember. I can see his face, but I can't remember his name. I could just remember that I know he's Mr. Victoria Tensing. He said, "Oh well, Napolitano's an idiot." They just said that Napolitano's an idiot on Tucker's show, and Tucker seemed to agree. He seemed to laugh and indicating agreement that Napolitano was an idiot. But I think Napolitano got very upset about that because you're not supposed to call your colleagues an idiot. And so they had to somehow smooth this out. But what I'm saying is that at the time, Napolitano was very, very far from Tucker's position. So Tucker hasn't really changed his position, or at least his position has changed gradually, since, I don't know, 2016. It's not an overnight thing as it is with Napolitano. Steve Brown says F-16 fighter jet recently supplied to Ukraine crashes. Mainstream media neglects to write that it was shot down. Yeah, no, I think that's right. Yeah, so that's nice. That's really good news. Let's say we'll see how that goes, but that's very heartening news. So then William Taylor says, I believe that's true because I've seen people that are banned on YouTube as guests on someone else's channel. Right. No, yeah. Yeah, no, but I guess as far as YouTube would be concerned, that the host would be responsible for anything that the guest said. But in this case, it seems that the problem was the host, not the guest. I mean, I'd assume that it was the guest, knowing Pepe, but no. So William Taylor says, "Is soullessness one of the options?" I think that's a reply. Dale says, "Sure is." Yeah, I think soullessness. Yeah, is quite a chilling person. And then Cynthia says, sorry, George, let me rephrase my question to you. Do censorship rules for YouTube mostly apply to what the host of the show says rather than what the guests on the show say? I don't know. I mean, that's a good question. I mean, I'm assuming that YouTube has its algorithm, and they pick up anything that's said, anything that somehow they deem to be in violation of their terms of service. And so it doesn't matter whether it's the host says this or whether it's the guest says this. So if somebody says, oh, well, whatever it is, I mean, if it is about the swastika, and then they pick it up on with what that on their algorithm. Oh, they say that the suggestion is that the Ukraine regime swears by the swastika, then they'll say, "Oh, that's hate speech." And so I don't think it matters whether it's the host says this or it's the guest says this. They would just simply boom, they take it off. And according to their policy, I think if this happens again, or 3 strikes and you're out, and then you're just banned completely from YouTube. So I think that's the way it operates. That each of these shows, there's the algorithm. The algorithm picks up certain expressions, and if they deem it violative of their rules, then you're banned. So Napolitano was banned for 1 week. I guess if it happens again, I mean, that's quite serious. I mean, it wasn't just one show. So that for them, that's quite serious. So you're banned for 1 week. And so if it happens again, I guess he'll be banned altogether. I mean, I think it's appalling. I mean, I'm not necessarily a fan of Napolitano, but he shouldn't be banned. He didn't say anything anything at all that deserves to be banned. I think it's again, it's a terrible, the censorship. And again, I don't think it's anyone who's just sitting there listening to these shows. I think it's just picked up on their algorithm. Anyway, Steve Brown says that why bother with Google, YouTube, or any Western media platform? They are all corrupt. I think that's true. But I mean, I guess, I mean, we got I mean, there are degrees of corruption. I mean, YouTube, absolutely. But Rumble is better. Again, Twitter, since Elon Musk, is an improvement. I mean, there are all sorts of problems with Musk, and there's problems with Twitter under Musk, but there's no question it's got better since he took it over. I mean, remember what it was like before Musk. I mean, then everyone was just getting kicked off. COVID denialism, vaccine denialism, election denialism. I mean, you name it, any kind of denialism, you were kicked off. And they were actively cooperating with the feds, as was Facebook. So, it's got much better since Musk took over. So, but yeah, look, I mean, but there's still plenty that's wrong with Twitter, but it's just better than it was. So Dale says, during the riots, he kept saying, "I will not tolerate this thuggery and violence and blah, blah." Came across as a pompous, priggish, sanctimonious little headmaster, disgusting individual. That's exactly it. Awful, awful person. Pompous, priggish, sanctimonious little headmaster. Yeah, the kind of person who's going to expel you from school without giving, a damn as to how much that would hurt the person who was expelled from school, how much, that would affect his future life, future career, and whatever. You just do it. He doesn't care. And it goes on and on about the far right, He makes no mention of the violence perpetrated by others, made no mention of all the Muslim gangs, of the violence they perpetrated, because that's the community leaders. That's something that community leaders have to deal with. So it's all the far right. The far right, for him, is the scum, the lowlife, the vermin. This is essentially the British working class, who he absolutely detests. It used to be, again, the core support for Labour. These are the people that used to be Labour supporters. No, he regards them as just low life, and makes clear that he's just going to throw them in prison. Not just like that. Just you pick them up on the street, you arrest them, you take them straight to court, and then right into the jail cell. He doesn't even think, hey, slow down. There's supposed to be a proper legal judicial process. You arrest someone, you kind of, he has to be arraigned. He has to consult with counsel. He has to uh, discuss or his various options, whether he should plead guilty, whether he should go to trial, or whatever. It's not supposed to be a kind of a one-step process. You're picked up on the street and right away you're in a jail cell for the next 2 years of your life. And again, your whole life is ruined as a result. That's it. You now have a criminal record. Try getting a loan, try getting a mortgage, try getting a job. You're done. That's it. You're 16 years old. You're done. Your life is ruined. But Starmer doesn't care about that. To him, this is just, he has no compassion. He has no understanding for others because he's just so arrogant. And so he just, just throw them in prison, the far right. But he says nothing, let's say, about what happened in the Notting Hill, the Notting Hill Carnival, the violence that took place there, which incidentally was at least as bad as any of the violence that took place during the riots. I mean, people were stabbed. I don't think anyone was stabbed during the riots. But people were stabbed. And of course, he has never really said anything about what happened in Southport. Mourning. Yes. I think the community needs to mourn. They must be allowed to mourn. And I'm going to allow them to mourn, and their mourning must not be exploited. The mourners must not be exploited. They must be allowed to mourn in quiet. Yeah, but these people have suffered great losses, and they suffered great losses because of a policy. It doesn't matter that the perpetrator was not a Muslim. Who cares? It would have been better. It would have been better if the alleged perpetrator was an illegal migrant, because if it's an illegal migrant, then at least you can do something about it. You can say, well, okay, well, we need to crack down on illegal migration. Any illegal migrants, we're just going to throw them out of the country. I mean, not that it's going to happen, but at least there would be a ready remedy available. What's worse is that it's a legal migrant. It is somebody who's a second-generation immigrant. And so the real question is, why was the first generation allowed into the country? Why were his parents coming from Rwanda? Why were they allowed into the country? Why? What was it that they brought to Britain that was so important, essential for them to be given citizenship in Great Britain? What was it? The taxi driver. So taxi driving is another one of those jobs that the British are not prepared to do. Amazing the number of jobs that the British are not prepared to do. Oh, I can't be a taxi driver. What about being a doctor? No, I'm not prepared to be a doctor. Nurse? No. Bus driver? No, we can't do that. We have to bring in migrants. They're the only ones who can do this job. So therefore the question is, so you brought them in, and now you've got a second generation immigrant, and this is how he responds to living in the country that he basically never really chose to live in. So, the truth is actually far worse than this the rumor about the sort of a Muslim migrant. But anyway, Starmer couldn't care less. Just said they should just be allowed to mourn. And that's and at no point did he show any compassion. Remember, he went to Southport, he laid some flowers, and then said nothing. Remember, he said nothing. There were people who were angry and were shouting things at him. Any human, any seriously human person would have turned around, and somebody who was a prime minister, who's a leader of the country, would have turned around and said something to the crowd. They were angry. The crowds were angry. But he should have said something. and say something along the lines that I understand how you feel, and this is unacceptable, and we're going to do something about this. He could have said that. Instead, he just walked off silently and contemptuously, and that I think really triggered the rage, and led to the riots. It's because of his pusillanimity and contemptuous behavior which triggered the subsequent riots. He could have headed it off. He could have made an absolutely perfect statement, and there wouldn't have been any riots. God, mosquito. Anyway, let's see. Singing Bicycle. Thank you so much, Singing Bicycle. He says, to be honest, Harris is much lower hanging fruit than Trump. Yeah, but the media are not going to do it. Then they're going to just keep writing about Trump. That's the formula. You know, every single day, 4 stories about Trump. Trump. I mean, I caught a bit on CNN yesterday. I don't watch CNN, but I just inadvertently caught this bit. They were talking about the debates, and they're saying about how Trump is really being very unreasonable. He's he's standing in the way of the debates because he's opposing the having open mics. Kamala wants open mics, and Trump is being totally unreasonable, saying that he doesn't want open mics. Now the whole calculation about these open mics was that Trump is going to talk, the open mic is going to talk, and then Kamala is going to do her "I'm talking now" or "I'm speaking now" routine, and then everyone does, "Oh, you go girl, I'm speaking." Then that's why they did. But none of these people who are on CNN, "Oh, Trump is being so ridiculous," his refusal to have it. No, Mike, none of them said, without, in the first place, the agreement on the debate on ABC News was an agreement that was signed by the Trump campaigns and the Biden campaigns. That was what the deal was. So Trump, after Biden dropped out, they said, well, there's no more deal. That was a deal between the Trump campaign and the Biden campaign. And now that there's no more Biden campaign, therefore there's no more deal. We have to work out some other debate. And so immediately the Harris people said, "Oh, no, that was the deal. That was, you signed the deal." He said, even though the deal was with Biden, it wasn't with you. "No, I got to be in the deal." And of course, again, CNN, "Oh, Trump is walking away from the deal. He's walking away from the agreement." And then he said, "Okay, fine, we'll do it." Then they turned around. Well, let's change the terms, because the terms of the original agreement were that no open mics. You speak and then your mic is muted. So they want to change it there. And again, Trump is being unreasonable. So first, Trump is being unreasonable in saying, "Hey, let's work out a new agreement, since there's a new campaign, so hence a new agreement on the debate." So he's being unreasonable. And then when he says, "Well, you can't change the deal because we said no open mics," he's again being unreasonable. And of course, no one mentions the fact that it's Trump who's insisting on more than one debate, and Harris who only wants this one debate and no more debate. But these are all kind of silly, tiresome points. I'm only bringing this up just to show how the media, they're in their little bubble, and the bubble is whatever the situation, it's always Trump. Trump is the bad person. Your job is to say how bad a person Trump is and how great by contrast Harris is. So Yokabichi, thank you so much for your generosity. Really appreciate. Steve Brown says, My wife watches CNN, and I have to leave the room. Yeah, I'm sorry. That's sorry that it was. You have to endure that, but those are the sacrifices you have to make. Um, and then Steve says, wasn't it George W. shit for brains who hired Nora O'Donnell? Is that true? She worked in the Bush administration. I don't know. I mean, I don't remember her. I thought she was a career reporter, but I may be wrong. It's the one who worked for Bush was Wallace, the Wallace girl. Is it Marjorie Wallace? I mean, she has a job on MSNBC, and yeah, she's the one who worked for George W. Bush in the as basically head of communications, and now she's an absolute crazy hater of Trump. I don't think that was Nora O'Donnell. I mean, maybe she worked for Bush, but I don't remember her working for Bush. But it was this woman, Wallace. I don't think she was Marjorie Wallace, so Steve Brown says Starmer has the mentality of a slave owner. Yeah, yeah. Rogen says that's an Australian accent, George. I don't think that's an Australian accent. I think I'm pretty good with Australian accent. I think I may not get Starmer right, but I mean he basically says my dad was a toolmaker. I don't think that's Australian. And then Marty presents Keir Starmer. There he is. Keir Starmer is trying to confiscate Nigel Farage's cigarettes. David Lynch started smoking due to America's strict smoking laws. Yeah, yes, that's right. It is again when you think of all the problems we're facing. I mean, you think back on the days when there was the crackdown on smoking. Well, that goes back to the 1990s. Well, back in the 1990s, no one really had any problems. I mean, everything's like, well, we sorted out all the problems. Communism is gone. Soviet Union's gone. There are no problems left. I mean, what do we have to worry about? Well, let's worry about cigarettes and all the harm of smoking. But that's that's not the world of today. So you kind of look a fool when you make that into an issue. Oh, well, we got to do something about smoking. Anyway, W. Baker, good evening. When you do the Starmer imitation, I always think of the union organizer in Are You Being Served? What was his name? I had to look it up. Larry Martin. Are You Being Served? It's one of those. I don't know if anyone's watched them. It's a kind of a sitcom from the I guess it was the 1970s. It really wasn't very good, but it had its humorous elements to it. The thing that I always remembered from that, I mean, there was the campy guy, Mr. Humphreys. Mr. Humphreys, are you free? Yes, I'm free. But the one I always remember was that young Mr. Grace, who was about 90 years old, and he would suddenly, this doddery old man. He was always young Mr. Grace. So apparently there was an old Mr. Grace who supposedly doesn't get around very much anyway. He was young Mr. Grace, about 90 years old, and when he'd visit the floor, he would suddenly say, "You've all done very well," and then he would just collapse on the ground because they had to prop him up, But you've all done very well. Anyway, it wasn't a great show, but thanks for reminding me. And the W. Baker says, "Oh, by the way, we're happy to export some heat and sunlight from the deep south. We've had a surplus this year." Well, good for you. Where in the deep south are you? And then Marty says, Lynch admitted in the interview that he's absolutely loved smoking, but in the end, it bit me. The tobacco and the smell of it, and lighting things and smoking and going back and sitting back and having a smoke and looking at your work or thinking about things. Nothing like it in the world is so beautiful. Huh. That's very well put. That's beautifully. That's really beautifully done. I really like that. And then W. Baker says yeah, that picture of the union organizer. Yeah. 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 No, that's a reminder. It's a long time ago. That show was it's. I think pretty much all the actors are dead now. I doubt whether any of them are still alive. Um, um, and then Martin says Peter Sellers. I guess Peter Sellers as Fred Kite from I'm All Right, Jack. Um, Marty says we need the return of Bernie Sanders. George does a Bernie Sanders impression. Thank you so much. But I think Bernie Sanders, I think, turned out to be a dud. We need a kind of a lefty populist, but a genuine lefty populist. But Sanders, he was useless. So I mean, Britain had some good lefty populists back in the day. I mean, you had Arthur Scargill, the miners' leader. And then, of course, you had Tony Benn. And, when you look back now and, Tony Benn in his heyday in the 1970s, he was really good, really fiery, very intelligent. It was good, strong critiques of capitalism. And then Cynthia says, why doesn't YouTube just provide us with a list of specific words and phrases that you'll get you banned from their platform? That way, no one will have any doubt as to why they were banned. Well, I wouldn't really give them ideas, because once they start compiling a list, that list is going to be quite comprehensive. I mean, there'll be, it'll be, hundreds and hundreds of things. And then basically, once you look at that list, you realize, I can't say anything. And that's, I think, what they're going to just keep in front of you. Yeah, you can't say anything, because look at all these different things that we can get you on. Basically, yeah, that's the goal. We don't want people speaking. We don't want people communicating. Anyway, Anne-Marie says, Switzerland is more and more showing its inglorious side. Indeed, in the Swisscom, the main telecommunications company, wants to build a drone surveillance net without respecting data protection and without asking its citizens, by simply lending the drones to the police, who are allowed to do with the film material whatever they want. God. Swisscom don't take any responsibility, and the drones are tiny and will be flying out of sight so nobody can see them. That is awful. Oh, God. Just read that out again. They want to build a drone surveillance net without respecting data protection and without asking its citizens, of course, by simply lending the drones to the police, who are allowed to do with the film material whatever they want. Swisscom don't take any responsibility, and the drones are tiny and will be flying out of sight so nobody can see them. So that's the goal. That's exactly what Macron and the rest of them want. Exactly. Surveil everybody. Nobody really knows what goes on. How would you know? I mean, you wouldn't know about these tiny drones, just like no one's really aware of these ubiquitous little cameras everywhere. So everyone is observed, and the last thing they want is any form of communication where there is some privacy, where people can actually exchange ideas, express thoughts that the authorities deem reprehensible, and then they're not going to allow that, and that explains why they're going after Telegram and why they're going after Musk. If I were Musk, I wouldn't make any trips to Europe. I really think, however much Musk may be a much better known figure around the world than Durov. I mean, most people never heard of Durov until last weekend. But I think these guys they're playing for keeps. And I don't think the fact that Musk is a much better known person than Durov will save Musk. I mean, they've gone after Musk already. We had Thierry Breton went after Musk. The British Labour Party are going after Musk. I don't think Musk should risk anything, at least not for the time being. See how things play out. But for the time being, I think it would be very foolish to make any trips to Europe. Why wouldn't they arrest him and do the same thing to him that they did to Durov? And W. Baker, in reply to Cynthia, says that's a feature, not a fault. Keep them guessing. Yeah, I know. As I say, I don't think we should give him any ideas at all for giving a list. That list is going to be really scary. Yeah. So W. Baker says just up the road from Cynthia. So that's where but in the mountains of Alabama, huh? So Alabama's that's a pretty cool place. That's interesting. And then Anne Marie says this is WikiLeaks. Okay, well I'll look at it later. Thank you for that link. I just want the impression Bernie's an us. Well, Bernie, we're good. The two-state solution. We're going to push for a two-state solution. That's your Bernie. He's got to, you got to kind of remember the guy's been living in Vermont all these years, but he's got that absolute thick Brooklyn accent. So anyway, Dale says, I thought Arthur English was the trade union man in Are You Being Served? Maybe that was his replacement. Yeah, I don't remember their names. I just remember their face. And then Dale says, "You can't get me. I'm part of the union." Anyone remember that song? It's cool, but it's been as hot as Hades this year. The garden has taken a beating. Yeah. Well, I guess so, but the more I think about it, and I guess you can pretty much figure from my gloomy and melancholic opening comments, I really don't like living in anywhere where you have these 4 seasons. I want to live somewhere where it's permanently warm, there's permanent greenery, and you don't have to worry about the seasons. It's always a kind of a pleasant, warm, bordering on hot time. There's always flowers, always trees blooming. I mean, that's kind of what I live. I just don't like this changing of seasons. They kind of really get me down. But I guess that's where I've always lived. I've always lived in places where the seasons change, and you have to put up with those horrible, barren winters with short days. I just, it's too hard. But anyway, Rojan says, first series of Are You Being Served was 1972. W. Baker says, come to Obama, Alabama. Okay. Yeah, that's a good idea. That's an excellent idea. Maybe that'll, that'll kind of cheer me up. But anyway, thank you, everybody. Thank you so much for all of your questions and suggestions and ideas and opinions. I really appreciated them. Thank you above all for those who have contributed generously. You know what tomorrow is. Tomorrow I have to face those dogs. They don't like me. They don't have no sympathy for me. They're the kind of equivalent of Keir Starmer. I mean, maybe that's a little unfair to them, but they have no pity. They have no human compassion. So they're just going to take me to task, as they always do. So, but that's my lot in life. Thank you, but anyway, who have contributed so generously. I really appreciate that. It's what makes this all worthwhile. So we will be back next week. Next Monday, we're going to do the live stream with Peter, and then Tuesday live stream solo with me. So W. Baker says, "Release the hounds." Yeah. Okay. All right. Thank you very much. Don't forget to watch the Kamala show And Mary Grossman says Costa Rica with wildlife would be warm. I heard from somewhere. That's also an idea. Yeah, Costa Rica. Hmm. That is a good idea. Thank you, Mary. But anyway, see you. All the best, and catch Kamala. Good night.